Hello, everyone. Welcome to the next part of the Manhwa, the novels extra. In the previous section, writer Kim Hajin was unexpectedly drawn into his own unfinished novel due to certain reasons. Here, he appeared as an unknown supporting character and became involved in the lives of the hero students at Cube Academy. With the ability to foresee events and understand people's thoughts, Hajin developed his knowledge and strength. Gradually, he transformed from an inconspicuous background figure into someone widely recognized through a midterm exam. However, some strange plot twists began to emerge, affecting the main character's storyline. Moreover, a hidden boss was secretly observing them within the school. What were her intentions, and how did the story unfold? Join us for part 2 of the Daily Dose of Anime Recap to discover the answers. And don't forget the little thing, please like, subscribe, and leave a comment. It'll motivate us to bring you even better videos next time. Right after the theory exam wrapped up, the beginning of the final exam was upon them. Captain, who was still disguised as Seo Yejin's, was still at Cube and seemed to be keeping busy with her newfound crew. Hajin sometimes picked up on her apparent enjoyment with those new buddies of hers. He hadn't anticipated bumping into her again after the midterms, but her return had a bit of a twist compared to the original story he knew. So, his current mission was to keep tabs on her to earn some more SP story points. Little did he know, she was more clever than he gave her credit for. No matter how hard he tried, all he managed to snag was a lone can of soda, which felt a tad underwhelming. Today was like any other day, with the students headed to their exams. And like always, Hajin was shadowing someone, maintaining a low profile. He couldn't help but wonder, maybe I need to observe Kim Suho and Shin Jonghak a little more? Out of the blue, the teacher chimed in. All right, everyone gather up. The rules for the final exam are simple. Survive on that island for 5 days and obtain points. He explained that they could rack up points by taking down monsters that lived on the island, taking them from other cadets, or buying and selling points. For those gunning for top scores, stealing an instructor's name tag could net them up to 200 points. Now, they were dispatched to different areas to kick off the exam. As Hajin stepped onto the terrain, he immediately began searching for Rachel. Making his way over to her, he asked, "Do you want to move together with me for the final exam?" Sporting an eager grin, he knew exactly what he was doing. He got off the ship with Rachel instead of other main characters. It was the result of thinking about the numerous changes due to the interference of the co-author. As long as there was a villain who held a grudge against Rachel, she was going to be the person in the most danger. "I'm more comfortable being alone," she said. That was precisely what he anticipated. Rather than proposing a team-up, he suggested sharing his location with her to preempt the co-author's interference. Nightfall brought Naeun to the woods, her mood tinged with irritation. Suddenly, a creature looking like a monkey-headed one descended from above, attacking her. It wasn't just one, there were several, and they were aggressive and spoiling for a fight. But Naeun dispatched them with ease, her sword skills doing the job. After clearing the area, Naeun let out a maniacal laugh and then vented, "Just where the hell is this? Ever since the moment I arrived on the island, I've been killing monsters like crazy. Just where the hell is the food and a place to rest? At this rate, I'm going to be the first to be eliminated." At her wit's end, a glimmer of light appeared ahead, and along with it, a tantalizing aroma. Without missing a beat, Naeun dashed toward the light, only to be taken aback by the sight of Hajin setting up camp as though he were on a leisurely outing. He was even grilling meat over a makeshift fire. Curiosity piqued, she inquired. "What are you? Where did you get all this?" "Taken aback," Hajin replied, seeing how long the test was. "I guessed what it was and made preparation." It was that straightforward, and it had slipped her mind. With her stomach growling, Naeun kicked herself for not catching on sooner, all while her hunger pangs practically echoed in front of Hajin. Reading the situation, Hajin proposed a deal. She could satisfy her hunger, but she'd have to part with half of her points for the privilege. He made it clear that a free lunch wasn't on the menu, she'd have to earn it. Famished, Naeun agreed and settled in to savor the meat using chopsticks. As she indulged, Hajin fired up his computer to hack into the drone server and surveil the remaining participants. A drone, responding to his command, captured a snapshot of Rachel. She stood in front of a cluster of guys who were grilling meat. One of them noticed Rachel and Riley remarked, "You want to buy some food? Just eat. It's a little weird to buy and sell points between us cadets, right?" After a peaceful nap in the woods, Hajin stirred and sat up while Naeun was still dozing away in his sleeping bag. Hajin's evangel seed also woke up, feeling hungry. He popped it into his pocket to bring along. Then he calmly told Naeun, who was still lying down, that he'd tidy up the tent before preparing everything and leaving. The moment of confrontation between the young cadets was approaching. Hajin was considering taking on the tougher opponents first, like the real heavy hitters, but he was set on avoiding causing harm to anyone. The cadets who thought they were demonic humans weren't actually demonic humans yet. A demonic human who was in a contract with a demonic human and a demonic human who was in a contract with a demon were different. In this location, only one young cadet was likely to overcome the side effect, Juyohu. Hajin's initial destination would be the Tree of Life situated at the island's core. Somewhere high in the forest, a gleaming arrow was aimed straight at Hajin standing below. It was lodged in a tall tree. However, just as the girl was about to release the arrow, Yuna stepped forward to intervene. She said bluntly, "No, you can't mess with that person." Her fellow teammate, Rose, appeared baffled and asked, "Pardon?" That person's rank was only 934 though. Nevertheless, Yona remained firm in her assertion that taking on him wouldn't end well. Meanwhile, as Hajin prepared to jump onto the Tree of Life, both of them watched intently, but they couldn't keep up with his swift movements. Geese, with that kind of speed, thinking he was weak was nuts. Seeing the other person's utterly astonished expression, Yona continued, "Rankings don't apply to someone like him. If you had shot your arrow, the result was obvious, even if you don't see it." At this juncture, Yona reminded Rose to keep his strength a secret from everyone. She was contemplating inviting him to join the group at some point. Not too far away, Hajin ascended the Tree of Life and employed thousand-mile eyes to locate his target. He scanned through numerous individuals until he pinpointed the right one. He snapped off a branch, attached a message and coordinates, and concluded by infusing it with stigma magic before sending it hurtling directly toward the intended person. The branch shot down at an unbelievable speed, piercing the ground near the young man's feet. He scooped it up without hesitation, and at that instant, Hajin grasped that his current task was to sit tight and await further developments. Turning back to Rachel's situation, things were definitely not looking good for her. Earlier, when she went over to Ju Yo-hoon's group to exchange food, they flat out refused to accept any points. Not only that, but they also seemed oddly attentive to her, which was kind of weird. While the test was in progress, Rachel noticed that these guys were acting strangely, not bothering to make any effort to earn points like the other cadets. It was like they were specifically targeting her. Rachel began to consider the idea of making a run for it, but just as she was about to leave, Ju Yo-hoon called her back. He was like, "Rachel, I found a 10-point grizzly bear. Do you want to catch it together with me? I think it's a little too much for me to do by myself." It seemed like everyone was out to get her. So, reluctantly, Rachel agreed, secretly hoping she could slip away unnoticed. Ju Yo-hoon took her to a hill, but it turned out to be a trap. Instead of finding a bear, they encountered a strange-looking guy who was waiting for them. The moment that guy grinned, Rachel knew something was off. And sure enough, without warning, he launched a fast and fierce attack. Swiftly, Rachel pushed Ju Yo-hoon aside, narrowly avoiding what could have been a dangerous situation for both of them. Initially, Rachel thought this mysterious character might be an instructor, but now it became clear that he was a demonic human. What she didn't expect was that he'd pursue her all the way to this place. The person she had just saved took off running, leaving Rachel to fend for herself. It was a frustrating and helpless feeling. Back to the main action. Rachel squared off with her adversary, sword at the ready. She boldly declared, "I knew things were suspicious, but I didn't think that a cube cadet would be an inducement for a demonic human. I misjudged that." The antagonist maintained his menacing demeanor and attacked Rachel with his sharp iron claws. A loud explosion echoed, followed by a scene of the ground marked with deep and jagged gashes. Fortunately, Rachel managed to evade the initial strike, but before she could catch her breath, her opponent was closing in. Drawing on her combat experience, Rachel skillfully parried just in time. Her hand trembled as she gripped the sword, well aware of her foe's strength. However, his current tactics alone weren't enough to defeat her. Without dwelling too long, Rachel swiftly executed a horizontal sword swing, successfully pushing her adversary back. She then continued to unleash a flurry of sword strikes, and upon detecting an opening in her opponent's stance, she resolutely thrust her sword forward. Yet, in an unfortunate twist of events, just at that crucial moment, Rachel suddenly realized that something was tightly coiled around her ankle, rendering her unable to move. The last attack missed its mark. As if that wasn't enough, another person identical to the first appeared behind her. Rachel was in a dire situation, caught in a pincer attack and immobilized by the bindings on her leg. It seemed she might not come out of this unscathed. Out of nowhere, arrows rained down from above, striking the person behind her. He crumpled to the ground, incapacitated. However, the other assailant continued to advance, undeterred by his fallen comrade. He was determined to finish off Rachel. The ground split open once again, accompanied by an electric surge in the air. Rachel was cornered and facing a critical moment. Just as things were looking grim, Suho appeared in the nick of time to rescue her. He shouted urgently, "Nayu now!" Right after his words, an arrow was let loose, striking the remaining assailant and causing him to retreat. After the dust settled, Naeun and the rest of the group rushed over. "That person wasn't an instructor, right? Are you okay?" they inquired. Meanwhile, Suho conducted a quick inspection of the surroundings. He concluded that the demonic human had likely jumped off the cliff before getting hit. The situation wasn't fully resolved, though. Rachel might still be in danger. So, Suho suggested they stick together until they completed the test and safely left the area. Everyone readily agreed. As they were preparing to leave, Rachel spotted something intriguing on the ground. It was a bullet, leading Rachel to deduce that the first shot wasn't from Naeun, but someone else entirely. The sky had just darkened, and Suho's group decided to start a campfire. They settled down in an open patch of ground within the forest, lighting a fire for warmth. Rachel held a bullet in her hand, lost in thought. She knew that only Hajin used a gun, yet she had never seen him use a sniper rifle before. Her mind wandered throughout the day, pondering, how did he know I was in danger? Why did he help me? And why did he not show himself after helping me? Rachel remained lost in her thoughts, tuning out the conversation around her until someone nearby called out, snapping her back to reality. Naeun suggested. I said, "Let's travel together. It'll be like doing a co-op mission." Despite objections from others, Rachel decisively declined. She had to meet someone and some questions to ask, so she preferred to go alone. Meanwhile, as Rachel headed toward Hajin's location, he was preoccupied with his own thoughts, his low score. Seated beneath a tree, he murmured, I took 12 points from Che Naeun. I got 10 points from killing the monster. If I want to be safe, I need to get around 50 points. Amid his contemplation, an unexpected visitor appeared. At the sight of her, Hajin's internal alarm bells began to ring. He wondered, why is she here? Is she here to fight me? There's no way I can defeat her. Should I run away? Hajin struggled to compose himself before asking, "What are you doing here?" Oh no, she was drawing her sword. Feeling a surge of panic, Hajin managed to force a smile, attempting to divert her attention. Li Xiaopeng, masquerading as Xiao Yijin, stood before Hajin, coldly instructing him to arm himself and prepare to fight. Unwilling to engage her in combat, Hajin knew he wouldn't stand a chance. However, he wasn't an easy target. He engaged in conversation to buy some time, while the Arthur thread began to stir beneath the ground. Things went fairly smoothly until Hajin successfully managed to take her watch. He considered it a definite victory. With no understanding of the situation, she saw him hold a watch and started querying, "What? Are you intending to surrender?" "Surprisingly," Hajin replied. "Does this look like mine?" Battles between cadets are won by the person who steals the opponent's watch first. You know that, don't you? If I press this now, you'll be disqualified. Li Xiaopeng was furious, but before she could react, Hajin unexpectedly returned the watch to her and stated, "I went easy on you this time." Swiftly, he pivoted and sprinted away before she could retaliate. After running a considerable distance, Hajin finally set up camp to rest after a long day of point accumulation. He was grateful that Li Xiaopeng was still in disguise. Otherwise, he might have found himself in a tough spot. Setting aside his worries, Hajin was about to start eating when Rachel emerged from the bushes, looking slightly sheepish. It seemed she was searching for him, but her growling stomach beat her to speaking. Hajin hesitated, but with no other option, he invited her to share his meal and engage in a conversation. While they were talking, the magical evangel seed suddenly popped out of Hajin's pocket, attaching itself to a wound on Rachel's neck and began drawing blood. Startled, Rachel let out a loud scream and was taken aback by the sudden intrusion. As for the magic seed, now full and content, it happily bounced in her palm, despite its owner's face buried in shame. Hajin hadn't expected it to react so enthusiastically, so he attempted to explain, "I'm sorry. That's a pet that I mean an almond that I'm raising. I mean, that's a pet seed." Luckily, his explanation was accepted, and he sheepishly retrieved the seed from Rachel's possession. He promised to take better care of it before returning to his dinner. Just as he opened the lid of the pot, Rachel suddenly spoke up. Hajin, I'm a little late in saying this, but would you like to team up with me? It'd be something like a co-op mission." Hajin agreed with a smile, but just as they were discussing it, Rachel remembered she was still a member of another group. Hajin realized she was referring to Ju Yohun's group and assured her not to worry about him. He mentioned that Yohun was currently busy entertaining guests. Ju Yohun brushed off Rachel and returned to his team's spot. What he saw there caught him off guard, a scene of devastation with monsters and fallen comrades strewn about. Strangely, none of them were breathing. He couldn't make sense of the situation, especially when he spotted Shin Jonghak wearing a look of anger. Before Yohun could utter a word, an object suddenly whizzed by and lodged itself into a large tree behind him. "Come if you think you can win. X 19.1 ya 34.9. A taunting message had been carved into a tree branch. Yohun hurriedly explained that this message wasn't sent by him and Jonghak must have been mistaken. Unfortunately, Jonghak wasn't interested in his explanation. He advanced closer, gripping the other person's neck tightly before speaking with clarity. "I just don't like vermin like you. The ones that don't know their place with their tongues out are like snakes." Jonghak's presence signaled that things were about to escalate. The following evening, a wandering beast in the forest became an unintended target for a gunshot. The deafening sound scattered the birds in all directions. Hajin gained more points by taking down the beast. Suddenly, he spotted a large lake ahead. He guessed that there might be more beasts lurking below. Undeterred, Hajin conjured a sphere of light, planning to lure them out. In the midst of this, he unexpectedly sensed someone tailing him. Though their actions seemed mysterious, Hajin's thousand-mile eyes didn't miss a thing. A swift glance revealed the person tailing him surprisingly. It was Nayeon, looking somewhat irritated. To facilitate conversation, Hajin drew his gun, aimed it near Nayeon, and fired. Startled, Nayeon jumped up and quickly protested any wrongdoing. After a brief argument, Hajin realized Nayeon had been shadowing Sunga and by pure coincidence had stumbled upon him. He motioned Nayeon aside and swiftly retrieved his computer to check the surroundings, striving to validate her words. As the story had it, Nayeon would keep an eye on Kim Suho for the first 2 days before shifting her attention to other promising cadets on the 3rd and 4th days. Oddly enough, Nayeon's claims held true. Her presence signified one thing: Hajin was undeniably on her list of standout cadets. Nayeon noticed Hajin working on his own and didn't hesitate to ask, "Hey, that aside, how did you do what you just did?" "That thing you made. That's the sphere of light, right?" Hajin gave a nod of confirmation, but then he switched on the charm, the kind that all women swoon over, while his words were a bit sassy. "But don't keep trying to find out more information. Shut up if you understand." Oh boy, what a cheeky response. Nayeon wasn't just disapproving. She added some scolding. "Have you gone crazy? I'm not even interested, so I won't ask anymore." Hajin's attitude was his way of keeping Nayeon from getting too nosy about his business. That's why he advised her to make a quick exit instead of lingering around and making a fuss. Even though he might come across as somewhat cocky, he couldn't tell her the truth. If he had told her about the mana of stigma, then he would have also told her about the fact that this world was within a novel. 2 hours had ticked by since Hajin and Nayeon parted ways. Thanks to his diligent efforts, his scores had shot up by a solid 15 points. Now, finally, the person who had been observing him for a while plucked up the courage to approach Hajin. Yeonseunga greeted him as soon as she arrived. "We're meeting for the first time after I got rejected, right?" Seeing Hajin's nonchalant demeanor, she wasted no time delving into the matter at hand. Sunga explained that her purpose for being there was to conduct events on top of testing the abilities of cadets. Henceforth, her plan was to stay in one spot and only used her left hand to deflect any attacks from Hajin. However, if any strike managed to inflict damage anywhere on her body other than her left hand, or if it forced her to take a step, she'd remove a name tag and promptly hand it over to him. Hajin was well aware that an inspector's name tag was worth a hefty 200 points. Acquiring one would propel him to the top of the rankings, surpassing numerous other cadets. But the catch was that he had to pit against the cream of the crop. Could he really manage to overcome such a formidable opponent? As Hajin maintained his silence, Sunga posed the question, "How would you like to proceed? Do you want to give up here, or will you take up the challenge?" Hajin responded with a smile, drawing his gun and unleashing a bullet enhanced by his mana, aimed at Sunga. Sunga saw the bullet right in front of her eyes, but didn't appear flustered. She wanted to see how strong Hajin was, so she decided to block it with her bare hands. With a swift motion, she caused the bullet to crumple and fall to the ground. Though she didn't show emotions, the impact had caused her hand some pain. Hajin was in a tough spot. His opponent had redirected the mana-enhanced bullet with precision and speed using only her left hand. Direct attacks didn't work, so he threw 2 throwing knives towards her to distract her. Sunga effortlessly dodged the knives with a tilt of her head, showing a hint of amusement. Refusing to give up, Hajin fired another bullet, but to his dismay, it met the same fate as before. Sunga's left hand easily deflected the attack. Sunga suggested he use the firepower, as it was way more powerful than those of the training firearms. Just as she let her guard down, the 2 throwing knives were suddenly yanked back, leaving her bewildered. Hajin thought that at this distance, she wouldn't be able to evade. However, the woman swiftly transformed into a blazing column of fire, not only thwarting his surprise attack from behind, but also causing his weapon to become overheated and melt. Following this exceptional defensive maneuver, the ground beneath Sunga's feet sank, forming a visually striking crater. Captivated by Hajin's skills, she quickly transitioned from a stern enforcer to a more amiable lady. All right, let's call it quits. No point in carrying on with the fight now. Hajin holstered his gun and just turned to walk away. Sunga seemed a bit puzzled about what was happening, so she started feeling a bit uneasy and wanted to go after him to try and stop him. All of a sudden, Hajin stopped and then clarified. You moved. You said you'd only use your left hand, but you used your legs as well. He kept explaining to help her understand. Their abilities were so mismatched that fighting hand-to-hand wouldn't give him a shot. To put it straight, continuing to fight would just be a waste of time, so he turned on his heel and left. If you think Hajin gave up the opportunity for a name tag for no reason, you've got it wrong. He had clearly come out on top, but in that moment, he pretended like she had won to avoid stirring up any resentment. Her attitude was basically shutting him up. If he tried to say something she didn't like, he would have been in a tight spot. So, staying silent and admitting defeat was the smartest move. Butterfly Sapling was a spirit-type monster that leached off a tree like a parasite. It appeared on the last day of the final exam and was killed by all the main characters. In the process of that, Kim Soo-hoo obtaining the dust of the sapling and Rachel getting a hint about the enlightenment was how the original story went, but things didn't play out exactly like the original story of the novel. Now, she was teaming up with him, and to help this character with her enlightenment, he needed to lead Rachel into joining the fight against the Butterfly Sapling. However, here's the hitch, a little awkward to admit, but he didn't know exactly when and where the monster would show up. Even though he was the writer, he spaced out and didn't provide all the details. So there was this scene where they were both lost and wandering around the forest like lost tourists. Over on Suho's side, they had just tackled some more monsters. Naeun said there were about 20 hours left until the exam ended. So with all these victories, they'd probably be at the top of the leaderboard. All of a sudden, she asked, "What do you think of Kim Hajin?" Seeing Suho still not getting it, she had to break it down further. Doesn't he look like he's hiding a lot of things? He was constantly suspicious, both in the museum and in Paris. It's also suspicious that he's pretty high-ranked and strong, despite having that frail-looking body of his. While they were chatting, tree roots started busting out from all directions, attacking from every angle. The whole forest was filling up with weird sounds, luckily reaching the lost pair. Hajin got a sense that something was off and told Rachel to hurry and come with him to the source of the tremors and kill the monster. He loaded up his gun with more bullets, and the other cadets must have also headed to where the Butterfly Sapling was. He wouldn't let them have this opportunity. Not too far away, Naeun charged at the roots, cutting a path in front of her teammates, who were all jazzed up. Down below, it was chaos. Suho looked at the Butterfly Sapling and said, "If taking down the roots isn't doing anything, we'll have to destroy the main body first." All of a sudden, a team member shouted, "Hey, look over there! That tree. It's strange. Something inside the cocoon is moving." And just like that, a massive butterfly burst out of the cocoon. Once it ditched the main tree, it flapped its wings, sending a cloud of dust into the air. Without realizing, Naeun and the gang ended up inhaling it, gradually losing their strength and conking out. Suho was the only one still awake, so he had to guide them to some safe spot. However, with the way things were going, he wasn't sure if he could take down the monster while he was constantly holding his breath like that. Up in the sky, Hajin and Rachel suddenly popped up, and they even managed to grab masks for themselves. They had just reached the spot when Hajin quickly assigned tasks to Rachel. He told her he would handle the giant butterfly, but he needed her protection from the tree roots. After giving the instructions, he raised his gun, aimed, and fired a shot at the butterfly's wing. The first attack was right on the money, but it also caused the main tree to go haywire, shooting roots towards them. Rachel held her ground, shielding him from the roots. As she moved, she noticed the ground beneath was quite soft. Suspicion arose, so without hesitation, she grabbed Hajin and pulled him away in time to avoid the emerging roots. Those roots were sharp like drills. While they couldn't harm them, they managed to entangle Rachel's leg and hurled her towards a nearby big tree. Other tree roots seemed to pinpoint his position, so they recklessly charged in. Handling two things at once was tough. Just when Hajin thought he couldn't avoid this onslaught, Suho dashed in and broke the encirclement, saving him. Rachel, after being hit, lay unconscious nearby. Now, Hajin was unsure of what to do next. While he was puzzled, the Evangel Seed woke up and fled to suck her blood. Man, with this twisted situation, what should he even call it? Suho had figured out Hajin's purpose and promptly stated, "You're here to defeat that butterfly, right? I'll help you out. I don't think I can move around for a long time, though." Hajin contemplated his resources. At present, he could only make 3 more fire attribute bullets with his Stigma's mana. Therefore, he needed to wrap things up before everyone succumbed to unconsciousness. Prior to commencing the battle against the butterfly, Hajin provided Suho with insights into the creature's evasion tactics. To secure victory, Hajin had to get in close for a shot. As such, he urged Suho to distract the butterfly until he could approach within striking distance. The plan was set. Suho channeled a substantial amount of holy sword power. Observing Hajin's remarkable composure, Suho remarked, "How fascinating. No matter what secret weapon I bring out, you aren't surprised at all. Have you figured out Naoan's talent?" "Hajin, sometimes when I look at you, it feels like I'm looking at someone who knows everything about this world." Without further ado, Suho departed, skillfully dealing with the encroaching roots. With Suho out of sight, Hajin retrieved his gun and hurried to a nearby towering tree. In his mind, he quietly answered the question of how he could know everything. It was simple. The person who created this world was him, the author. Because of that, a problem occurred. This world that he had written as a novel was currently right in front of his eyes. As time passed, he started feeling like he had become a character he'd never written before. He was an outlier in the novel, a separate entity named Kim Hajin. A bullet infused with fire magic hit the butterfly's body, engulfing it in flames. Unfortunately, it seemed that one shot wasn't enough to take down the creature, and he needed to fire another. Unexpectedly, a special situation unfolded. Just as Hajin was about to reload, a mighty lightning bolt struck the creature, defeating it right before everyone's eyes. Hajin couldn't believe his eyes. It wasn't him or Suhu who had beaten it, but Li Xiaopeng, masquerading as Seo Yijin. When the butterfly dropped, Suho wasted no time and rushed over to slash it with his sword. Despite his efforts, he ended up being knocked out by that annoying sleep dust just before he could retrieve the dust of butterfly sapling. Hajin sensed the boss's interest in the item, so he quickly intervened, saying, "Hand it over. That's an item that you can't take." The girl clearly didn't fully understand the function of the butterfly dust. She wanted it just because the loot from a spirit could sell for an expensive price. To be prepared for future battles with spirits, Hajin needed to save the dust for Kim Suho, not let her take it so easily. In the boss's eyes, Hajin was the only one still standing among the group, but that wasn't true. He had reached his limit, and just as he was about to put on the mask, the girl attacked him without explaining why. They were both pulled into a dark circle to avoid being noticed by others. Here, after getting rid of her disguise and returning to her real appearance, she asked seriously, "You know me, don't you?" Hajin replied fearfully, "You are Li Xiaopeng, right?" The name was mentioned, but she herself didn't seem to know whose name it was. Only after a while did she suddenly remember that Li Xiaopeng was the fake identity she had used to get close to him before. However, she didn't want to act friendly and immediately threatened him. She wanted to know when he had figured her out. If he dared to lie even a bit, she would definitely kill him, maybe even hurt him badly. Even though it was still a lie, Hajin easily tricked her by saying he had noticed during the watch incident. and had sensed something different about her when he looked closely. Hajin pointed to his eyes and then reluctantly admitted that he had pretty sharp eyes, which made the boss think that he was special and his mana was anti-magic. In that case, it'd make sense how he was able to see through Jane's talent. So, he was a valuable resource she couldn't afford to lose. The boss put down a black shield and handed back the dust of butterfly sapling, but she also wanted him to exchange it for his contact information. Hajin thought it might be tough, but if that was all, he was okay with it. Holding the butterfly dust, he wasn't quite sure how to give it to Kim Soo-hoo naturally without raising any suspicion. He was busy all day, and only then did he remember his little seed. As he looked over at where Rachel was, he saw her glowing. This phenomenon was when Evangel transformed into a human form. Just as he suspected, a small child resembling Rachel slowly appeared after the light faded. However, when the little girl sat next to Rachel, she suddenly said something that surprised him. "Dad, Mom fell asleep again." 4 days after the test wrapped up, all the students were back in good health. Upon reflection, the supervising officers all agreed to distribute points among the 4 cadets who had pitched in to take down Butterfly Sapling. The following morning at 9 a.m., as the train journey back to Cube got underway, Hajin stood in the train taking in the vast beauty of the ocean. He then checked his smartwatch, but there were no messages from the chameleon troop. Just as he was musing about why the Captain Exia Oping had singled him out, Naeun suddenly appeared. She was there to confirm whether Suhu's claim was true, whether Hajin was indeed the one who had vanquished the butterfly. She couldn't remember anything after waking up. Thankfully, Hajin was not the one who had taken down the grotesque butterfly. Naeun, despite being in high spirits, seemed a bit darkened when Hajin inquired why she had used a sword instead of her usual bow. She snapped back in annoyance, attributing it to Hajin's suggestion that she switch weapons. Given her assertive response, Hajin decided not to pursue the topic any further, acknowledging the potential risks of wielding an unfamiliar weapon. He had simply wanted to gauge Naeun's feelings about using a sword, so he had asked out of curiosity. To his surprise, she still harbored fear. Even though Naeun tried to put on a calm facade and conceal her fear, Hajin could see through it. He reassured her, saying, "You'll become good with it after you use it more. You're born with a talent for swords after all." His words seemed to touch her, and she remained silent, moved by his encouragement. With the test behind them, most students took advantage of the downtime to rest, eat, and have some fun. In a dining hall at Cube, Yonha, Naeun, and Suho were seated together, eating and discussing the possibility of Hajin having a soft spot for Naeun. Yonha remarked that Hajin usually maintained a reserved demeanor and kept his distance from those trying to approach him. However, Naeun seemed to be an exception. Yana sensed that Hajin genuinely cared about her. As the two girls engaged in a spirited debate, Suho spotted Hajin entering the dining hall. Responding to Suho's call, Hajin approached and exchanged greetings before swiftly heading off to buy food and returning to his dormitory. When he called, Evangel rushed over, her face lit up with excitement. Despite Hajin's attempts to correct her, referring to him as Dad, she remained perplexed and innocently asked why she couldn't address him as such. Observing Evangel's innocent expression, Hajin slowly recollected the events from a few days prior in the forest. When he came, she had already hatched beside Rachel, and, to prevent others from discovering her, he instructed her to transform into a seed, and then secretly brought her back to his dorm room to keep her hidden. Since then, he had effectively become her dad. While the young girl enjoyed the food he had brought, Hajin examined the particular type of dust of butterfly sapling in his possession. It stuck to targets that had mana. It helped to awaken hidden dormant potential. Originally, Rachel and Suho should have acquired the dust of butterfly sapling, but now it was in Hajin's possession. He was mulling over whether to give it to either of them. Meanwhile, Rachel found herself contemplating Evangel. She pondered over the identity of the child she had encountered in the forest that day. Though the encounter felt dreamlike, she could sense the girl's energy, leaving her with a feeling that they would cross paths again someday. The next day, Over at the Statue Plaza within the Cube Training School, Yana seemed to be waiting around for someone. After a bit of waiting, the person she was anticipating finally strolled in. As soon as she caught sight of Hajin, she couldn't resist poking fun, saying, "You're here. I thought you'd reject me." Truth be told, Hajin wasn't one to be overly confident. When he first received the guild tour announcement, he didn't hold much hope of making the cut. Only the top 300 from the final test were supposed to be eligible. His score from that final test was a modest 67. So, when he received a message from Hero Straits, it really caught him off guard. Despite one more person yet to arrive, Yona and Hajin didn't feel like playing the waiting game and forged ahead. In a matter of minutes, they laid eyes on the towering Hero Straits building. Stepping inside, they were guided straight to the analysis room by a guild tour guide. That guy's name was Park Sang-ho. He was in between intermediate and advanced grade and the left hand of Yanha. He mentioned that Hajin had aced the theory exam, earning him the privilege of visiting the analysis room. While Yona engaged in lively conversation with Sang-ho, Hajin hung back, observing. Were he not the author of this story, he might have pegged Sang-ho as a decent guy, given his warm and affable demeanor. According to Hajin's intel, Sang-ho would eventually take a dark turn and betray Yona. Out of the blue, Lee Jin H popped up on the scene. As soon as she caught sight of Hajin, she couldn't resist a sardonic remark. "The world sure has gotten a lot better. To think someone who's ranked 934 the able to have a guild tour at Hero Straits. I wonder who managed to help pull that off." And just to add a little twist to it, she slyly nudged him to extend his gratitude to whoever had ushered him into this experience. Truth be told, Hajin had a hunch from the get-go that the person who could pull strings and get him on this experience was Yana, being the guild leader's daughter. As far as he knew, Jinna was also in between intermediate and advanced grades and currently supported Jung Hosake, the vice captain of Hero Straits. Despite the rough patch in their relationship at the moment, Jin H and Yana were destined to team up in the future, with Jin A taking on the mantle of vice captain. In this particular moment, Jin A was still ribbing Hajin about his high rank in the theory test. Her condescending tone was really starting to get under his skin. Just as Hajin was nearing the end of his tether with Jinna's taunts, she suddenly thrust a stack of papers into his hands and challenged him to give them a whirl. But when he requested some paper and a pen, she seemed to hesitate. Seizing the opportunity while Jin 8 went off to fetch the last member with Sang-ho, Hajin dove into solving the papers. The stack of papers Jin A had handed over contained information about variables that might come into play when tackling dungeons. Although he knew it was no walk in the park, he still gave it his best shot. He was on the brink of cracking the puzzle when Jin A reappeared. Not only did she snatch the papers back, but she also laid into him with a scolding before briskly ushering him out of the analysis room. As Hajin exited the analysis room, he unexpectedly met Naoan. The vibe she was giving off was more akin to someone spotting an adversary. It seemed she didn't know that he came to Hero Straits, and he couldn't quite wrap his head around why Yona hadn't clued him in about Naoan's involvement. Later that afternoon, in an office bearing the name Yu Yin-hook, a man sat there, chin resting in his hand, staring intently at the stack of papers strewn across the table alongside a photograph. His demeanor bore the weight of disappointment, having spent an entire month delving into Hajin's past, yet yielding precious little in terms of substantial information. In fact, his niece was indeed the one who wanted to investigate Hajin. Sang-ho gave the three a heads up that today's gig was an activation mission, so they all needed to be mentally prepped and ready for orders. Out of the blue, Yona got a call and asked everyone to move ahead while she stepped into the restroom to take the call. It was Yin-hook on the line. Even though he had dug up some info about Hajin, he wasn't spilling the beans to his niece. When he got wind that Hajin was on the hunt to find his parents, Yin-hook cut the call short pretty quick. According to Yin-hook, The Gwango Dungeon Massacre incident went down about 16 years back. Monsters took out 87 normal citizens in the shelter and the 9 heroes who were trying to play protector. Although the government and the association concluded that it was done by the demonic humans, Yinhuk smelled something fishy. After poking around for a solid decade, he figured out who the big players were. The president of South Korea at that time, Kim Seok-ho, the chairman of Daeun, Chae Ju-chul, and the final suspect, his brother or Yoo Yeonha's father, Yoo Jin-young. Yinhuk was on edge. If Jukyo got wind that he was snooping around the massacre, he'd probably go for the jugular in no time flat. While he was freaking out a bit, Team Hajin got their first gig. Their smartwatches pinged that a large group of stone golems had turned up on XX Street. Hajin was busting his chops to keep pace with the crew, but for some reason, the more he hoofed it, the more he lagged behind. By the time the trio got there, the stone golems were on a rampage, wreaking havoc and causing chaos all over the place. One of them had targeted 2 children, but Yonha swooped in like a boss, putting a stop to its mischief with some kind of wire trick. Sang-ho seized the moment and went in for the kill, smacking one of the golems with his spear-like weapon. When Hajin finally caught up, Naeun was already mixing it up with a stone golem. At first, she was gonna rock her bow and arrows, but she had a change of heart and decided to bust out her sword when she saw the golem was just 2 meters tall. She caught on that the weak spot was the ankle, and as she went to give it a good whack, the golem hit her in the stomach with a powerful punch. Just as the golem was winding up for round 2 on Naeun, Hajin swooped in, somehow managing to pull her to safety. In the aftermath of the shock and realizing the strange aspect of his powers, Hajin advised Naeun to use her sword from a distance. Her mana reserves far exceeded those of typical heroes, even surpassing Suho. As Hajin predicted, Naeun's sword unleashed limitless energy when used from a distance. Her mana capacity was indeed impressive. Within moments, they managed to vanquish all the disruptive stone golems. As Hajin was making his exit, he suddenly spotted a girl on a mountain not far from where they were. It was the same girl he had encountered during a previous test. When Yona got back to Hero Straits, it was pitch black outside. As she entered the analysis room, Jin-A was giving her shoulders a good stretch, griping about the strain. Yana suggested Jin hand over the paperwork to the administrative staff to deal with, but her stubbornness prevailed. Yona tossed out a suggestion, by the way. What's with that paper? Do you use pen and paper to calculate? Jin finally noticed the jumbled mess of papers Hajin had left behind. As soon as she picked them up and took a peek, she was taken aback. Before Hajin called it a night, he got a text from Jin-A. It was super polite, asking if they could meet up to chat. Realizing that Sang-ho was with Jin-A, he shot him a quick text, letting him know he wouldn't be able to make it to the gilding tour they had planned for the next day. After teasing Jin, Hajin let out a tired yawn and walked over to check on Evangel. He found the little girl fast asleep on the floor, looking pretty worn out from all the playtime. Once he'd settled her into bed, he headed down to the kitchen and pulled out the bag of the butterfly sapling's dust. To his surprise, there was a lot more of it than he expected. Taking a moment to think, Hajin decided to split the dust into 3 equal parts. He planned on giving one part to Suhu, another to Rachel, and keeping the last part for himself. He figured that while Suho and Rachel were important, he also needed to ensure his own survival in this world. After giving it some careful consideration, he chose not to directly apply the dust to his body. Instead, he dumped it all into ether. As he waited for ether to absorb the butterfly dust, he got a message from Naeun. She thanked him for his help during the battle against the stone golem. They chatted for a bit, but looking back, they didn't really exchange a whole lot of messages. When he reviewed their entire chat, Hajin couldn't help but feel a bit foolish. Meanwhile, Yona was busy at work. She had to write reports and even put out a job posting for the guild. Out of the blue, Naeun called her and asked if she wanted to attend a seminar next Tuesday. At first, Yona wasn't interested, but when she found out that Shin Jong-hak would also be there, she quickly changed her mind. Their conversation shifted to the drone footage from the battle against the stone golem the previous day. Mentioning the clip, Yona playfully needled Naeun, saying, "It was filmed properly. It looked like you went right into his arms." Naeun suddenly exclaimed, telling her not to go spreading the video around. Yana wanted to tease Naeun a bit more, but she was short on time, so she ended the call. Just as she hung up, she was informed that Hajin had canceled his guild tour. While Yona was fuming over Jin H messing things up, Hajin received some good news from the system. It informed him that his SP skill points had gone up to 89 and his extra luck points had been activated. However, no matter how hard he tried, his physical stats would continue lagging behind over time. So, he decided to focus on selecting and improving his weapons. Having used up all the butterfly dust on Ether, he decided to dump all his SP into a weapon instead of his physical body. This boost required luck points, and his luck was only in the top 0.1%. After pondering it for a bit, he still wanted to try leveling up his item identification skill. He thought that more points would lead to better results, but it ended up flopping due to insufficient SP, which resulted in the quality dropping. Just when he was getting desperate, the system kicked in with his luck, and he managed to succeed. According to the random enhancement system, he could optimally identify up to 5 weapons. Although he wasn't completely satisfied with that outcome, he recognized that he couldn't control this parameter to his preference. Attaining this was a stroke of luck, and he felt thankful. Hajin might have hurried the enhancement process because he was eager to get to the travel club in England. In the past week, Hajin headed to a quiet spot to put his new skills to the test. With all his SP invested in his weapon, he still needed to train his physical health. So, during his summer break, he focused on improving his fitness. But no matter how hard he tried, his stats remained unchanged. While his body stats stayed average, Arthur had fully matured. After reviewing some basic info, Hajin decided to give Arthur a shot. Just as he intended, the sphere in his hand transformed into a dagger. He tried the dagger on a rock, which shattered upon impact. Even though it seemed ordinary, the dagger's strength was remarkable. It not only smashed the rock, but also left a long gash in the ground. He suddenly grasped the utility of the details manifestation and random enhancement features. Before Hajin embarked on a mission with his guild, he exchanged a few words with Evangel. He kept it brief, advising her to behave at home and only make animals with the spirit friend, not humans. Surprisingly, she retorted a bit testily. Simultaneously, at an opulent palace, Rachel was delighted when Henry informed her that she could approach Hajin using the Imperial Guild. After pondering a bit, Rachel aimed to pull Hajin to her side. While she was strategizing, Hajin arrived at the guild's activity location, Clancy Islet. As he knew, this place was made by the English government using the floating crystals that they processed. It was a place where everything money-related was located. It had all sorts of entertainment, auctions, and release events for new items. It was an island of gold, which was basically like the Las Vegas of England. Naeun really liked the place. Out of the 4 of them, only he and Sangho were visiting for the first time. According to their guide named Oh Han, there was a big event on the islet at 7 p.m. that night, and Hajin got permission to attend. When Naeun found out they could go anywhere from now on, she quickly led everyone to the casino area. After looking around a bit, Hajin went to exchange some tokens. The person behind the counter was very friendly, and he recognized her as Jane. After changing his money, he was planning to find a place to play when he heard Naeun say, "Ah, it's so unfair." She was playing cards with some guys, and the guy sitting in front of her with blonde hair was Vert. When Naeun wanted to leave, Vert teased her on purpose. She got upset and sat back down right away. Not only that, Naeun boldly said that if she played fair, she'd break even like eating cake. Yet, in line with the plot, Nayoon lost all her money within a mere 2 hours and locked herself in her hotel room, crying and frustrated. She still didn't know that the people playing with her were actually on the same team, so she was too focused on the game. Actually, what Hajin was most interested in and concerned about right now was the bracelet that the leader Vert was wearing. It wasn't about worrying about Nayoon losing her money. Just as Nayoon was on the verge of losing her last bit of money, Hajin stepped in and said, "Stand up, Shay Nayoon. I'll play instead." Just as Hajin wanted to join, a guy left the table. Nayoon caught on that Hajin wanted to play, but she was worried he might not have enough money since the bet was 100,000 won. Seeing him not worried and quite confident, she didn't say anything more. After the staff explained the rules of the game, which was 7 poker, they began dealing the cards. The guy sitting next to Hajin was surprised that Hajin wasn't looking at the cards. He asked, but Hajin surprisingly replied, "Nope, not gonna look at them." The guy didn't realize that even without looking at the cards, Hajin could still see his own hand. So, he thought Hajin was a bit foolish and didn't know how to play. Hajin didn't pay much attention to them. He decided to reveal the 3 of clubs, but he didn't know why that guy still got angry with him. Feeling the tension, Vert, the leader, stepped in and told the guy to be patient since Hajin was a cadet from Cube Training School. Meanwhile, at the money exchange counter, Jane was briefing her boss on the identities she had investigated, including Hajin's. Jane still believed Hajin didn't know her real identity because she couldn't sense his movement of mana. Hajin observed Vert for a moment and noticed he had an impressive poker face, staying unfazed regardless of his hand being good or bad. At the moment, Vert's current cards had an aces full, and for Hajin to win, he needed at least a 4 of a kind. However, the chances of a 4 of a kind appearing after a full house were pretty low. With Hajin running out of money to bet, Vert quickly suggested betting the ring Hajin was wearing. Although Hajin downplayed the ring's importance, Nayoon realized it meant a lot to him. She tried to stop him, but Hajin remained determined to continue playing. Hajin motioned for Nayoon to sit down and reassured her, "I definitely won't lose, so just stay still." After calming her down, Hajin proposed that Vert also put something up for betting. It was the bracelet he had on. Once Vert agreed to the bet, he wanted to reveal his hand first, and indeed, as Hajin had suspected, Vert had a full house. Just as Vert was celebrating and collecting his winnings, Hajin started revealing his cards. As soon as he saw that he had 4 of a kind, he pretended to ask Vert if he had won. Vert was utterly shocked and enraged, and as he was berating Hajin, security staff came and took him away. While Nayoon was giving Vert a piece of her mind, Hajin examined Vert's bracelet. Hajin believed that Vert didn't fully comprehend the true value of the obsidian bracelet of Athens citizens. Though it could store mana, the user wasn't able to use that mana themselves. That meant the mana simply flowed around within the bracelet. That problem can be solved by just imprinting other magic aspects onto the bracelet though. Just as Hajin was about to imprint a physical strengthening magic onto it, Nayoon called him over, diverting his attention. Once they finished exchanging their money, Hajin and Nayoon went shopping. Hajin treated himself to a new set of high-end clothes, while Nayoon recounted the entire casino incident to Yonha and Sangho. A guy suddenly appeared. He greeted Nayoon upon arrival. Although he came across as friendly, Nayoon didn't seem to take a liking to him. Despite her annoyance, Yonha struck up a conversation with him. According to her, the guy's name was Kim Junwoo, a hunter from Light Source. While they were all chatting, Xia Oping discreetly summoned Jane. At the moment, the River Thames portal was bustling with activity. A reporter mentioned that the event had been organized by a company called Lawton. She also shared that a unique white crystal would be showcased at the party that day. Ignoring the reporters who were vying for her attention, Rachel confidently walked into the Clancy Islet. Inside, Rachel immediately bumped into Zealand. He was all talk, assuring her not to worry about security, since he had hired a bunch of advanced-grade heroes to guard the event. Despite the crowd at Clancy, Hajin was sitting by himself. Hajin started to check his smartwatch and survey the surroundings. In a world that was swarming with demonic humans, he couldn't believe such a dangerous event was being hosted. In his plot, the Lotan Group was one of the most corrupt companies. Even though there weren't any demonic humans among its executives, it was a place where the deeds that they did were as evil as demonic humans. Therefore, he believed the white crystal shouldn't fall into their hands. There would be a total of 3 main demonic human characters that would likely appear at this event: Nade, the crystal carrier; Silason, the combatant; and Kim Hajin, the team leader of the Evil Society's relic retrieval team. Leaning back thoughtfully, Hajin considered his options. With his current abilities, he couldn't foil their plan to steal the white crystal. So, he decided to remain observant and see if events unfolded as they were supposed to. Suddenly, Xiaoping approached and greeted him, catching him off guard. "Oh, Xiaoping, you're here too?" he quipped. She explained that she was present as a guard hero for the event. In the midst of this, Xiaoping overheard a girl whisper, "Captain, you finally met your crush. Congrats." For some inexplicable reason, these teasing words triggered Xiaopeng's temper, causing her to exclaim, "What nonsense are you talking about?" Although Hajin sensed Xiaopeng's outburst stemmed from something deeper, he pretended not to notice and continued conversing with her nonchalantly. Shortly after, Yona and the others arrived. Hajin briefly introduced Xiaopeng to the group. Suddenly, Junwoo looked serious. He wanted to know how Xiaopeng knew Hajin and which group she was in. Xiaopeng looked at Junwoo silently, then said goodbye and left. At the same time, on an upper floor, Rachel was also observing them. When she saw Hajin wearing the relic she had given him, she felt delighted. After waiting for a while, the event showcasing the white crystal began. On the platform, under bright lights, Zenlin was continuously introducing himself and the white crystal. According to him, the white crystal was not only a rare and valuable item, but also the most unique because it held a significant amount of mana. While everyone was marveling at the beauty of the white crystal, Rachel noticed that the number of black puppets walking in the hallway was increasing. Although Rachel was worried, she knew she couldn't act recklessly, so she could only stand by and continue observing. Suddenly, she saw Hajin quietly leaving the party. Because he seemed quite suspicious, she immediately used the shadow expansion skill and stealthily followed him. Because this floating island was constructed from mana, the demonic humans couldn't access it via portal. Therefore, they had to enter using an air transportation device. After absorbing Zelen's explanation about the white crystal, the executive of the Evil Society suspected Zelen's excessive greed for money had blinded him. Zelen seemed solely focused on proving the authenticity of the crystal on stage. Rachel continued to tail Hajin closely. After a while, she noticed him halt in front of a sizable door. Rachel believed this door led to the rooftop, but access to it was restricted. Hence, it was securely locked. She surmised a key was necessary to unlock the door, but Hojin surprised her by wielding a hammer. As she was wondering how he got a hammer into Clancy, he suddenly swung it. Just like she thought, he really wanted to break the steel door made with special mana using a regular hammer. When Rachel saw the door completely destroyed, she couldn't believe it. But they didn't know that chaos was happening below in the big hall, caused by some demonic humans. Meanwhile, Zelen found himself detained by Nade. The white crystal was now in Nade's hands. In the midst of Nade's attempted escape, a hero intervened, arriving just in time to strike. Assuming Nade couldn't dodge, the hero swung his attack. However, the dust settled to reveal not one Nade, but multiple Nades. Initially confident, Jin Xiangchen was taken aback. Once the multiple Nades ran around, confusion set in, leaving him uncertain about whom to pursue. Meanwhile, in a different location, Neun had just defeated a monster. Now, She and the remaining fighters weren't just battling the demonic humans, but also facing a destruction human. Suddenly, Naeun heard someone calling her name. As she turned to look, she saw Juwoo, his face smeared with blood, looking disheveled. As soon as he arrived, he tossed a sword to Suhu, declaring he had obtained it from the demonic human. Meanwhile, Hajin had ascended to the rooftop. In the original novel, Nade had split into multiple entities to escape. The first one ran eastward, followed by a hero. However, this Nade didn't possess the white crystal. In the southern direction, another demonic human in the guise of Jane was fleeing with Nade. Yet, even this Nade wasn't holding the white crystal. Zia Oping chased after the Nade heading north. In the original story, the Nade she pursued was the one holding the crystal. After a chase, the pursued entities eventually attacked Zia Oping. Although 4 of them lunged at her simultaneously, she remained composed. As they approached, she released a black sphere. Initially, they were oblivious to the danger, until one of them was corroded by her dark sphere. Panic ensued among them. Nade initially wanted to escape, but it was too late. He had only managed to run a short distance before a surge of power pierced through his body. Just when Hajin thought that things were going according to the main plot, he discovered that even the Nade pursued by Xiaoping wasn't real. It was just another one of Nade's decoys. Hajin hurriedly took out his tablet to check. Seeing no notifications, he concluded that the story hadn't changed, but it was a change caused by the current situation's variables. After thoughtful consideration, an idea struck him. He could focus the mana of the stigma on far sight. With that succeeded, Hajin ultimately located the demonic human holding the white crystal. Hajin wasted no time and went after the person carrying the white crystal as soon as he saw them trying to escape. Without hesitation, he leaped down from the rooftop. Spotting a nearby motorcycle, he hopped on and revved it up. Meanwhile, Naeun was busy urging everyone to leave Clancy. Hajin approached her and handed over a sword he had taken from Sidious. A mana sword was a special weapon depending on the mana capacity of its user. Its stats could have a world of difference. And with the amount of dormant potential that Naeun had, she could display power even greater than demonic humans could. Hajin didn't have time to explain. He simply cautioned Naeun to be careful and swiftly moved on. Using the 1,000-mile eyes once more, Hajin tracked down the person with the white crystal heading southeast. However, that person remained oblivious to Hajin tailing them. Just as the person thought they had escaped, Hajin caught up and crashed into his vehicle. The motorcycle impact was strong, causing the car to flip onto its side. The person managed to crawl out of the wrecked car and, by chance, spotted an aircraft appearing in the sky. His excitement got the best of him, and he yelled, "Boss, over here!" But Hajin wasn't about to let that happen. He quickly accessed his computer, punched in the aircraft's code, and sent it back to storage. That person was left puzzled, his boss suddenly ignoring him and steering in a different direction. His shouts went unanswered until Hajin closed in on them. Just then, something came hurtling at tremendous speed and crashed to the ground, triggering a massive explosion and kicking up a cloud of dust. Hajin thought he had the situation under control, but now a new problem arose. The formidable Chu Jung-young. He was holding Rachel and the others with just one hand. Jung-young was undeniably strong, and Hajin knew he was facing a real challenge. Seizing the opportunity, while Jung-young was distracted, Hajin skillfully employed Arthur Thread to snatch the valise away. Seeing Hajin hold the luggage, Jung-young warned, "Put that down while I'm talking nicely." Hajin didn't flinch. He leveled his gun at the valise and calmly demanded Jung-young release Rachel. But Jung-young wasn't giving in. He not only resisted but also challenged Hajin, thinking ripping her head off would be faster than Hajin putting that bullet in it. Unfazed, Hajin responded confidently, "That doesn't matter. If you don't let her down, you won't get what you want." Jung-young didn't expect Hajin to be so bold. In the end, he pretended to agree and threw Rachel towards Hajin. With Rachel out of harm's way, Hajin kept his promise and handed over the valise, aware he couldn't handle it anyway. He was going for the best-case scenario by handing it over to Rachel and letting the UK imperial family be in possession of it. But now things had changed. With Jung Young around, Hajin had no choice but to use the valise as a bargaining tool. To his surprise, while he was momentarily distracted, Jung Young took the opportunity to attack. Could Hajin avoid it? Facing such a strong opponent, how would he manage to keep them both safe?